Once there were valleys of rivers used to flow. Once
Braithwaite, the chief.
Chief!
Yeah! Let's get it started now. Please welcome the Poet Laureate of the NCTTA, Mike Reff.
The chief was a man full of character and drive, charismatic sportsman, diplomat, coach. Through deep faith, love of people and life, his actions on and off the table beyond reproach. His two main sports of track and field and table tennis highlighted his career and established his legacy. On table with paddle, to opponents he was a menace, but was gracious with his time to outball levels of proficiency. With a galvanizing presence, riling up crowds in exhibitions, managing to make the spectators cheer with chants. Some say if the Chiefs' main games were played in social media's innovation, he'd probably garner many likes from fans he'd strike in wondrous trance. One anecdote states that the chief would arrive 2 hours before his games would start. The first hour to greet all, so no one was deprived of his good-natured spirit, and last hour for the warm-up part. So this is an ode to the chief who's demonstrated that sports and character go hand in hand. And as a human, he is the highest rated. And ratings are something ping-pongers understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Now, please help me welcome our esteemed honorary guests. First up, former permanent representative of Guyana to the United Nations and former president of the UN Table Tennis Club, Michael Ten Pao.
Thank you, Carol. And I want to say, first off, thank you in a public way to Thomas and Luce and all the other hard-working members of the organizing committee who put together this beautiful commemorative event in honor of George here today. I think George would have been pleased to see so many of his friends and admirers here to celebrate his life and to honor his memory. He would have been proud to see the refurbished ping pong tables here in this beautiful Capobianco field dedicated to him. He lived in Roosevelt Island for many years. You know, I have a memory that I treasure of George. When I was much younger, I was a table tennis player. I love the game of table tennis, but sadly, the game of table tennis did not love me quite as much. And so I ended up in my playing career as an average club player. But we had great times at the United Nations Table Tennis Club where I played during George's time. And that was in the early 90s, early to mid 90s. There were several top-notch players in the club at that time. But George was the best of them. King George. That name sounds nice, King George. But in fact, we didn't call him King George. We call him the Chief. And the Italians have a lovely expression for the kind of chief that George was. They would say, Il capo di tutti i capi, the boss of all bosses. And so when I was in that club, the amateurs, we would hurry up to the club, which was on the roof of the UN building after work in the afternoon. And we would hit for an hour or two. And then around 7 or 8 o'clock, the bosses, the senior players, they would arrive to practice. And a few of us, myself included, we would hang around to watch them play, to see how champions play. And they would practice until 11 at night, midnight, sometimes even later. And once in a while, before the bosses began to play, George would hit a few with me. Not anything fancy, just keeping the rally going, keeping the ball in play, giving me a few tips along the way, and stressing to me how important it was to be consistent. That was his big thing. He was a great believer in consistency, not flashiness. In fact, he described his own style as controlled aggression on the table. So that was what I remember about George. The generosity of the man. Here you had a man who had come from Guyana, as someone mentioned, who was a track star in Guyana running the 100, 200, and 400 meters, representing Guyana, winning medals for Guyana. And he came to the United States, migrated, and was working at the United Nations, and one day he discovered in a pile of documents he was working on an old table tennis. I understand you call them paddles these days. We call them rackets in my time. He found this old rubber racket in a pile of documents, and he began to play at the UN club, and the rest is history. He switched from track and field and ended up becoming a world-rated table tennis player. And this was a man who, during his long career, he won no less than 70 titles, table tennis titles, in the US and overseas. And there was one run in particular that he had, I call it a magical run, where for 27 straight years, every year he won at least one US open or closed tournament. And along the way, he was the Caribbean men's singles champion, he won the doubles champion, he won the mixed doubles champion, and of course we all know that in 1989 he was inducted into the US Table Tennis Hall of Fame. This was a man who played tennis for the Prime Minister of China, Zhou Enlai, Chairman Mao Zedong. He played before President Nixon at that so-called time when you had the ping-pong diplomacy in 1971 that helped lead to the end of the isolation of China. And in fact, some say it changed the course of history, and George was a part of that. But George was not only an outstanding player, he was an outstanding human being. And that is what I'd like us to take away from George's life. Here was a man who had reached the pinnacle of his sport and still had time, the generosity of spirit, to share his time and his talent with others. You know, when I was a kid growing up in Guyana, there was a very popular sportscaster by the name of V.L. Crombie. And I'm sure my fellow Guyanese, Mike and Sidney Christophe and Mark, would recognize that name, V.L. Crombie. And every night on the radio after the sports roundup, V.L. Crombie would give the following piece of advice. It's not whether you win or lose, but how you play the game that matters. And I heard it said that George, he believed that you have to put friendship first and competition second. So my friends, that is the lesson I hope we can all take away from George's life and the legacy that he's left us, that we too can make a difference by showing the same generosity of spirit, sharing our talents. It is not enough to be good at something. You work hard, you develop your talents, but then you share it with others. So that hopefully when we pass one day, others might continue to be inspired by the life that we led. Just as today, we are here gathered, continuing the legacy and continuing to be inspired by the Chief, George. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce the ITTF representative, four-time Olympic qualifier and ping pong pro coach extraordinaire, Matilda Ekholm.
Hello everyone. My name is Matilda Ekholm. First, a couple of words to introduce myself. I grew up in Sweden and I used to play table tennis professionally. I won a few matches, enough to qualify for the Olympics a few times and win 17 national titles. In short, table tennis has been my life since I was very little. Last year I officially retired from international competition and emigrated to the US. I'm still working in table tennis with a deep mission of helping grow this fantastic sport. Just like today, I have worked with the ITTF Foundation in the past and will hopefully continue to do so, as it is a great honor to be part of such a mission-driven organization. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the ITTF Foundation, it's the part of ITTF, the International Table Tennis Federation, that helps grow the sport outside of the performance and elite athletes.
Was it registered before?
In developing
Before you-
countries, in countries, in
It's right there
continents,
for it. Yes, it
all
was.
over the world.
Maybe
Okay,
I
it's
shut it
got
off.
that one. You can
On
show, you see it's
behalf
not coming
of
up.
ITTF,
Okay.
I want
So
to
shut
say
it
the
off.
following.
Yeah.
ITTF is
This one.
honored and proud to support today's event to commemorate Chief
Let me try.
George Braithwaite. As some of you might know, the term ping pong diplomacy started in 1971 when Mr. Braithwaite, as a member of the US national team, visited China for a set of friendly matches during the peak of the Cold War. His and his teammates' charisma won over millions and helped defrost the tensions between East and West, eventually leading to 50 years of peace and prosperity for two of the most powerful countries in the world. This year happens to be the 50-year
He said cannot
anniversary
output while
of
shooting
ping
4K.
pong
That's what it
diplomacy.
says on the message.
To commemorate this moment,
okay.
Because
ITTF
I'm
has
shooting.
planned celebrations this year and next. Our motto is peace on the table.
Okay.
We want to use table tennis as a platform for dialogue, a platform to reduce conflict, and a platform to promote diversity and equality. Just like the event in 1971 at the country level, but also at the grassroots level. ITTF is just starting to do what Mr. Braithwaite had done all his life. ITTF has celebrated World Table Tennis Day annually on April 6 since 2015. It is the day we celebrate table tennis, as well as the universality and social inclusiveness the sport represents. Ping pong diplomacy will be our main focus for the upcoming World Table Tennis Day next April. We look forward to a close partnership with the George Braithwaite family for this event next year. I look up to Mr. Braithwaite as a role model for all of us, and I feel inspired by his leadership, his generosity, and his kindness. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Maddie. Now I'd like to introduce Willie Leporullo, President of the NCTTA.
Hey everybody. So I'm president of NCTTA, for those of you that don't know me. I'm really happy to be here. This is a great event. I was asked to speak as well for Victor Krupinski, who couldn't be here today. Victor's a board member at AYTTO, and he had some words that he wanted me to share with the crew here. A little personal story in terms of how he came here. 30 years ago, he immigrated from the U.S. to Poland. He stepped into a table tennis club. He didn't know anybody, and he was maybe a little lost, we'll say. And a man with a huge smile on his face approached him and offered to play. And he didn't even know if Victor could play table tennis or not. They had a great practice and a match and a great conversation, a meaningful one. A man with a big smile and a big heart. Guess who? The Chief, George Braithwaite. So, you know, we're here to celebrate his character, the way he was for all of us. And on my personal end, I knew him in the early 2000s. I was a newly anointed board member for USA Table Tennis back in the day, like really in deep, didn't know what was going on. And this man who had never met, George Braithwaite, comes up to me, he welcomes me, he's very gregarious, and he says, welcome. These words is something that will sit with me and have sat with me forever. This welcoming spirit is what we need in the sport today. His passion, his exuberance. These are things that we all should want to replicate. So with that, to honor and celebrate the Chief's character and contributions, AYTTO and NCTTA have partnered together to create and fund the George Braithwaite Community Service Awards. And you know, this is to recognize individuals in our sport that are giving back to the sport, in essence following the footsteps of the Chief. And so the one award will recognize an adult in the AYTTO and NCTTA family that exhibits these outstanding traits that the Chief had. Another award in the form of up to a $5,000 scholarship to a high school senior in the AYTTO family that again demonstrates this volunteerism, this need to organize and participate, and just helps others be better in the sport. The goal of these awards is ultimately to honor the Chief's legacy and to promote to youths and adults to help us follow in his footsteps and make the sport better for tomorrow.
We got it. It was in your pocket.
Thank you. And now we have a very special guest. Please welcome from the New York City Department of Education, the Commissioner for PSAL Table Tennis, Janet Miles.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for the awesome privilege of being able to be here and to see all of this going on in the table tennis world outside of high school. Just watching some of the matches, really, I saw some of the students that we've had on our teams and former students, and so that's exciting. Over 18 years ago, when Lance Hermes, my boss at the Public Schools Athletic League, first joined PSAL, he had pushed the idea of introducing table tennis, the Olympic sport table tennis, to high schools. Kind of sat on the back burner for a few years, but with some pushing and some encouragement, and with a lot of help from Ben Nesbitt and the former director of the PSAL, Donald Douglas, table tennis was announced as a varsity sport back in 2014. Over the years, it has been led by former Commissioner Andy Brockman, who was there for 2 years, and then I've had the privilege of being able to move the sport forward in high school athletics since 2016. Of course, it would never be done with the help of 3 very special people who have helped me all along the way: Thomas Hugh, Edmund Swain, and Wilson Chia. So thank you, gentlemen, for making this sport a great high school sport. At the PSAL, we are currently running 21 boys teams over all the boroughs of the city, and Queens, Brooklyn, etc. And we have a total of 34 girls teams comprising 7 divisions. We run a full program for them with competition matches between the different schools, as well as running 2 tournaments towards the end of the year, both team and individual. In addition to the PSAL competition, we also encourage our students to get involved in some of the major tournaments, the sanctioned tournaments that occur over the weekends that are going on in the city. The PSAL has collaborated with the AYTTO to bring about some great clinics for our coaches, helping them to develop their skills in both learning how to play the game themselves, as well as teaching the skills and strategy to their high school students. We've also been able to, we've also really appreciated the contribution by SPIN. They have, over the course of time that I have been the commissioner, have donated over 40 tables to our high school programs. So thank you, SPIN. And thank you, AYTTO, for helping with our coaches. In addition to just helping at the school level, AYTTO also, a couple of years ago, provided an opportunity for approximately 15 of our athletes to travel to China for a full month. They went over, attended clinics on how to play table tennis, got to experience the Chinese culture over there, and brought back a deeper love of the sport of table tennis to their high school programs. The schools that had those students accelerated in their number of students that they had and the type of play that actually was going on at that particular school. My boss, Lance, has been a lifetime New Yorker and the PSAL coordinator for many years. And he was aware of the challenge that many of our schools face when they have to try to provide space for athletic teams. And that challenge, of course, is space. I have actually witnessed how table tennis coaches have risen to the occasion, because as I go into schools, I see matches being held in school foyers. I see matches being played in hallways, in classrooms where desks have been moved out into the hallways. and in cafeterias. So the coaches are being very creative at allowing the opportunity for many students to be able to compete in table tennis. Oops, I lost my place. Table tennis is a sport that does attract a variety of different people, many of whom might not necessarily enjoy more rigorous sports. However, the chief did run track and field, so that's really awesome. But as you know, table tennis is not for the faint of heart. And so we do encourage our coaches to really run it as an official sport with warm-ups, practices, competition, and all sorts of other play or drills that would really help them to grow in the sport. It's also a great sport that can provide healthy choices for students, giving them a place to hang out that is a safe environment, giving them a sense of community and belonging, and helping them develop wonderful relationships that they can take with them when they leave high school. It's also a sport that they can love and play for a lifetime. So thank you to the chief for being able to bring table tennis into a full opportunity for high school students, as well as many of you who play, to really be able to enjoy the sport of table tennis.
Thank you very much. Now we have something completely different. I'd like to introduce Alan Good, founder of Henge Concrete Tables. Those are the tables over there. And former member of the esteemed Merce Cunningham Dance Company, performing a dance to the chief. that was extraordinary. Okay, now, please give a very warm welcome to a very special person representing the Braithwaite family, Ms. Luce Reset, the Chief's longtime friend, confidant, and partner, sharing fond memories.
On behalf of myself and the family, good morning, honored guests, and welcome to everyone. My heart is so full. You can hear me? Okay.
Now.
My heart is so full to see so much love and support in the honor of the Chief. I know he would be so proud and fulfilled to see all of you here to share in this special day. In planning my words for today, I was trying to focus more on George, the person, apart from ping pong diplomacy and the table tennis guy. But it's very difficult to separate because that was such a big part of his life. So of course, I end up writing mostly about table tennis. The Chief told me about when he used to watch the guys play table tennis in Guyana when he was a young boy. And he would fetch the balls for them and sometimes keep a ball for himself. But they wouldn't let him play with them because they were older and so good. It wasn't until he started working at the UN that he found an old racket and started to play at the UN Table Tennis Club. He also used to play in clubs around New York City. At first, no one would play with him. Then one day, he got lucky. A very good player was at one of the clubs with no one to play with. So he pointed to George and said, "Hey you want to hit some?" George was ecstatic. This was his lucky break. From then on, he started working really hard, practicing at the UN and New York City clubs. He started off as a chopper and then transitioned into a top sprint player. He was already great physical shape from his track and field days in Guyana, but he continued to train physically, doing a lot of jogging and strength training. He said his focus was always playing for the point, not trying to make a big killer shot, which is why he became so steady. He felt that he wasn't the most talented player, but definitely one of the strongest tactical and strategical players. In 10 short years, George qualified for the U.S. team, although he didn't start playing table tennis until he was in his early 20s. This was an amazing feat and unheard of. I also started in my early 20s, and I'm still trying to make the team. George went on to become one of the most decorated table tennis players in U.S. history, gracing the covers of the Topics Table Tennis magazine, the Ebony magazine, Times magazine, etc. And of course, he was a member of the historic ping pong diplomacy team, thereby forever sealing his place in history. And many of you may not know this, but he was also a sportswear model in his youth and did some ballroom dancing. He was an awesome dancer. I first met George in the early 80s when I walked into the Firehouse in Chinatown, New York City, where I met so many top-notch players. When I asked, "Who's the best player here?" everyone pointed to George. I said, "Really? I mean, we're in Chinatown, for goodness sakes." But he was the best player there. At the time, he was about maybe in his 40s. I met so many friends at the Firehouse, and we would practice all the time. We all used to enjoy watching the top players battle it out. George Braithwaite, Alex Tam, Ray Domingo, George Cameron, Alice Green, and Vicky Wong. At the old Firehouse, we had neither heat nor air conditioning, believe it or not. It was a very old building, but we didn't care because we all loved the sport so much. In the winter, we could actually blow smoke out of our mouths, and sometimes we wore gloves to play. Wow. The amazing thing is that I could never imagine playing under those conditions now, but it was all part of the fun then.
I'm going to switch to a different screen.
We
Hopefully
didn't
it'll
have
be
many
okay.
local
Yeah.
tournaments back then as we do now. However, in Westfield, New Jersey, it was the hot spot for monthly tournaments. George would be in the finals almost every month. He played with such consistency, mobility, and long rallies. It was absolutely amazing. It was usually George and Ray Domingo in the finals, and both were consistent players. So it was beautiful to watch as we would experience them artfully perform this beautiful game. George would go on to win the senior event in his category on many occasions in Westfield and throughout the country. Also, which meant he was over 40 and 50, but he was still winning major events. Every time George won a point, he would do a little jog around his side of the table. He told me that is why someone gave him the nickname the Chief, which is so befitting of him. I quit the sport for about 15 years. However, like all of us, table tennis was always in the back of my mind. I decided that I wanted to play again, so who do I call? Of course, the Chief. I said, "Hey, George, remember me?" He said, "Hey, Luz, are you still alive?" I met him in a Flushing club, and I was so nervous because here I am out of practice and about to play with one of the most consistent players in table tennis. Well, I figured George is a nice guy. His favorite word for women was gorgeous, and his favorite for men was chief. People called him the Chief, but he called the other guys the Chief as well. So maybe I can catch a break as a female and he wouldn't be too tough on me. To my surprise, I was quite consistent even after 15 years. So immediately he took it up a notch, but he said he would keep the practice light. Okay, let's move on to the second practice date. The Chief came out to play. No more gorgeous Luz. Hey, Luz, when I say put the ball here, I mean put the ball here, not here. Those of you who know the Chief, you know what I'm talking about. If I missed too much or put the ball in the wrong spot, he would crook his head to the side. I hated when he did that. Even as he got older, he was so consistent and made everyone he practiced with look good. But he was a no-nonsense guy. If he was there to practice, then he was there to practice. No idle chatter, no gossiping, no giggling. He hated that. Because of practicing with him, I became so consistent, I could actually practice with those with a much higher rated than me and hand right in there with them. As a matter of fact, once I was practicing with George at Westchester Table Tennis Club, and he was warming up for the tournament. Now, if you're warming up George for a tournament, you better be consistent. I was having a good day, keeping the ball on the table and putting the ball exactly where he wanted. So here I am, a regular player, warming up with the almighty Chief. While picking up a ball, a lady approached the Chief. She obviously didn't know him. With a lot of excitement, she said, "Excuse me, sir, can you introduce me to her?" That's me, wow. "Is she on the national team? I never saw her before." The Chief made the introduction and we later laughed about it. So the lady went home thinking that I was a national champion, and I never told her any different. I always wondered if she ever figured it out, that the Chief was the actual champion. There were several things I admired about George. He was charming, charismatic, in great physical shape, and he loved people. He was also a very positive person and rarely had anything negative to say about anyone. On the island here, he would always greet everybody, the bus drivers, cashiers, public safety, store employees. Everyone seemed to know him, but I'm not sure if they knew how famous he was because he wasn't one to brag. One day, on the Roosevelt Island, administration decided to open a table tennis club. When we went to visit the club, George introduced himself to management. They were so happy to meet him, and he asked him to put together a proposal for coaching on the island. George asked me to help, so I took on the task. I wrote the proposal, designed the promotional booklet, and amended the contract. It was a daunting task because George was meticulous in every area, but we got it done. He was hired and created such a great coaching program for mostly kids and some adults. Then the club grew nicely, and on some days we had wall-to-wall people. George was kind and friendly to all. We end up having such a great camaraderie. Some of those players are here today: Rustin, Gail, Tahir, Lewis, and Juan. RIAC was so pleased with George that they honored him with a plaque in the outdoor table tennis park, which you will see here today. At tournaments in the West Coast, East Coast, it didn't matter. So many people would approach him. Some wanted autographs. Some wanted to reminisce about their old matches. Some wanted to just talk, young and old. George would say he had to get to a tournament an hour before warming up just to greet everyone. He would sometimes try to hide right before his match so he could focus and meditate. He would go all the way to the top of the bleachers, but people would find him. They would run to the top. "Hey, George, how's it going?" He would be annoyed at that point because they broke his concentration. But most of the time, he wouldn't let on. People never seemed to believe how old he was, even if in his younger days. They thought he was much younger than he was. He told me a story of how in a major tournament in an age event, someone went to the control desk and accused George of lying about his age so that he could qualify for the over 50 event. The guy claimed he heard a rumor that George was much younger. George had to prove with his passport how old he was. He said, "Whoever lies to make themselves older? People usually want to be younger." He said he was so angry and he really let the guy have it. Some of you have seen his wrath, and it's not pretty. But I loved him when he was angry because he was just as articulate when he was angry as when he was calm. It was a beautiful sight to see. George would practice in so many places, but he was very particular with who he practiced with. He would play with anyone, but you better put the ball where he tells you to put it. As I said, another fond memory is practicing with Thomas Hu in the basement of his building in Manhattan. It was just the two of us. Actually, it was just the three of us. George would buy coffee and bagels for all of us. Thomas and I would always start warming up first, and the George would sit on his throne, a special chair that Thomas gave him, enjoying his coffee and bagel. I would sometimes ask, why does Thomas and I always have to start first? Thomas would say, because he's the chief. I won't win that battle. Sometimes Thomas and I would be exhausted, but not the chief. At this point, he was already in his 80s. It was amazing how much energy he had, surpassing much younger ones in that area. We really miss you, George. But the memories live on in our minds and bring joy and laughter to each and every one of us. It's truly amazing how often your name comes up in conversation. Later, Michael Henry will sing My Way in a tribute to George, which is a song that George always said he wanted to be sung at his memorial when the time came. I initially asked the DJ to play that song for his event, not knowing that it is the same song that Michael had intended to sing. What a coincidence. I guess we all know that he did it his way. And now, I want to take this opportunity to give thanks to all of our sponsors and donors. Without you, all this event wouldn't be possible. To all the volunteers, my sincere appreciation goes out to you, as you are the heart of this event. To the committee, what can I say? You worked countless hours to make this event happen, and the family commends and appreciate you for your hard work. And to all of you performing and speaking today, we offer our deepest gratitude. All of us here are here because of our love and admiration for the chief. The family is very humbled by this event. Lastly, there is one person who the family gives special thanks to, and that is Mr. Thomas Hu. Thomas was a close friend to George and did so much for him. He spent countless hours practicing with George. The chief was very happy to be involved in the American Youth Table Tennis Organization, where Thomas was one of the founding members. Therefore, the family was happy to support Thomas in his effort to plan this great celebration of life event for the chief and to support the George Braithwaite Scholarship Award. My hat's off to you, Thomas, for your hard work, diligence, and leadership. Thomas and I fought like cats and dogs sometimes, and I would say, hey, the chief wouldn't like us fighting like this. Well, then again, maybe he would love it. But in the end, it was all worth it. Again, Thomas, we thank you and the great team you put together. I know you had sleepless nights, so I hope you catch up on your sleep tonight. No more fighting. At the end, George wanted to be remembered as he was, so we honored that. George, we miss you, we love you, and we will continue to remember the good times and play the best table tennis that we can in memory of you. May you rest in peace. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Luz. Now somebody that Luz mentioned is here to sing one of the chief's favorite songs. Please give a warm welcome to Michael Henry, aka the Caribbean Cowboy, performing and playing My Way.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna do a song, and the name of the song is My Way. As a singer-songwriter, I had a lot of songs, and I told Miss Britt that I was gonna do one of my songs that I wrote. But it came to my mind, it's going in and out a little bit. So I said, you know what? In looking at the chief's life, as a person who known the chief over 30 years, yes. So I said to myself that she's going in and out. Going in and out.
It's okay.
Testing 1, 2, 3. This is much better. I'm going to do the song my way, and it's more fitting to sing this song instead of one of my songs. And now the end has come, and so I think the final curtain, my friend, I've said it clear, I've stated my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled and every highway and more, much more than this. I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do. I saw it through without exemption. To think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way, oh no, no, not me.
We're going to cut all this stuff out, the fluff. Okay.
I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, and I bit off more than I can chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I held it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall, and did it my way. I've loved, I've laughed and cried, I've had my fear, my share of losing, and now as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way, oh no, no, not me. I did it my way. Oh, what is a man? What has he got? Not himself, then he has not to say the words he truly feels, and not the way the one who kneels. Oh, the record shows I took the blows and did it my way. Oh, the record shows I took the blues and did it my way. That's how the chief did it. He did it his own way. I've known him for so long, and I've watched him, and he has done it his way.
Go.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Wow, really amazing. As we're getting close, I'd like to introduce some of the chief's dear friends. First up, I'd like to introduce one of the chief's teammates from Guyana. Let's welcome Michael Christophe. Right this way.
Good afternoon, everyone. I bring greetings to you from all the table tennis players of Guyana who has played with Chief or was inspired to play by the Chief. As a former team member of Chief, I recall in 1977 where we changed the whole idea of table tennis in my beloved country. Guyana was hosting the Caribbean Championships in that year, and there was a buzz in the city because this middle-aged gentleman was coming down to represent Guyana and thus improve our chances of winning the Caribbean Championships. And the Chief did not disappoint. Our National Sports Hall was filled to capacity. A lot of people were coming to see this ageless wonder and also to cheer us on. As a member of that team, my only responsibility really was to win one game, and my other teammate, Andrew Casaira, was to win another game, for we know the Chief would have won the other three, and thus lead us on to victory. And it worked well. Every year, every game, every night, we got that support from the Guyanese in attendance, and soon everyone could be heard saying, "Chief, Chief, Chief," whenever the judge was playing. And every time he won a point, especially an important point, you used to see his face pointing in the air and saying, "Yes." And soon the crowd took over that. Now we won that year, primarily thanks to the Chief, and he played unbeaten in the team events. Sad to say, on the night of the semifinals of the singles, his teammates as well as the Guyanese public, we all left that stadium teary-eyed and sad because he lost in the semifinals his old nemesis, George Haslam from Jamaica. And that was the only person who defeated the Chief for the entire tournament. Now, Chief's performance that year opened the doors for Guyana later stalwarts, like my brother Sidney Christophe, whom you know was Guyana's champion for 14 consecutive years, and in that time he was also the Caribbean champion. And the Chief was able to inspire Sidney as well as the other players, and it was sad when we heard the news of his passing. So on behalf of all the players who were inspired by the Chief, the players who played with the Chief from his beloved country of Guyana, I say thank you for a job well done, and the chief will always be in our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome to the microphone a friend and former colleague from the UN, Mark Anthony.
Hi everybody. Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry. It's so nice to see so many people out here come out here to support this event. This wonderful, wonderful event. I joined the UN in 1977 and I was only 18 at that time. I had the honor of meeting George, the chief, the following year. Being young and enthusiastic and wanting to be involved, I joined a few clubs, and the table tennis was one of them. Table tennis club was one of them. I watched and admired the chief from afar. I guess you would know why. He was my senior. He was older than I was, and a table tennis champion. And I felt very intimidated. So I watched him from afar. I don't remember how and why and when, but we did get to talking one day, and I told him that apart from playing table tennis, I was an amateur boxer. Actually, apart from playing table tennis for fun, because as Michael Tenpau said, I liked table tennis, but table tennis didn't really like me. I wasn't very good. Anyway, I played it for fun and exercise. I told him that I was an amateur boxer. He seemed to be intrigued and impressed. And to say the least, I felt very proud to be in his company. Since he was living in Brooklyn at that time, he offered to help me with my speed work. So we met on a few occasions, on a few weekends, to do speed work at the track. I didn't know at that time until he told me, yes, he was a track star and did the 100, the 200, the 400. I was in awe, to say the least. He was training me, a little peon, you know. I was a little nobody, and he just came to the track to train me, help me with my skill. Wow, I was impressed, totally impressed. Anyway, to fast forward, because you've all said so many wonderful things about him. A lot of things you said about him I didn't even know until now. Luce, you said so many things about the chief. I'm still thinking, did I really know this guy? He's an amazing person. Anyway, fast forward now. He knew that I was a freelance photographer in those days, and he asked me to come to his home, which now was in Roosevelt Island, to take some family portraits of himself and family. So I think one of the photographs made it to one of the table tennis magazines and a Caribbean publication. Fast forward again, in the early 1980s, he asked me to accompany him to Las Vegas. Wow, still starry-eyed in my head, you know, Las Vegas. This would be my second trip on an aeroplane, my first being coming from Guyana to the United States. So, going to Las Vegas, yes, why not? He paid for the trip, put me up, I was his roommate at the Tropicana Hotel. And of course I had a fantastic time, really fantastic time. Anyway, fast forwarding again, 2014, United Nations, we normally have some games we have in various parts of the world, in Europe mainly. But 2014 was the year that UN New York was hosting United Nations Interagency Games. And I was a part of the organizing committee. We needed someone to coordinate the table tennis tournament. So, without even thinking twice, who do I call? Who do I call? George, the chief. Of course. He did a phenomenal job, and I believe that same year they got the gold medal. I believe the gold medal. Claude, do you know if they got the gold or the silver? Who was the silver? They got the silver. Yeah, they got the silver medal. But I tell you, if you had any tournament, table tennis, to organize, don't think twice. Call the chief. The chief. A man I respected, a man I looked up to, and wished to be like when I grew up, of course. He was an amazing athlete, always in shape and prepared. A friend, a colleague, and a gentleman.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, you may not know this, but right now, this entire event is being streamed on Facebook. Thanks to our next guest, one of the chief's oldest friends, dating back to before ping pong diplomacy. He's also the creator of the George Braithwaite website. Jules Apatini, would you come up and say a few words?
George was one of the most nice human beings I've ever met. About a year ago, half a year before the pandemic happened, he came to our center over on 92nd Street, where only young people play, everybody above 70. And I bade him, and I said to him, George, I'm 73, you're close to 85. What do I need to do to play like you when I'm 85? So he said, don't eat, run, and sleep a lot. Anyway, we go back way before the ping pong diplomacy. My team, the New York Hungarian team, which had the best players in the US, Eric Bogan, Scott Bogan, Tim Bogan, Errol Resek, David Sakai, Ali Ovesi. All these people were on the team, and we used to visit his club up on the UN. And the only person that was able to beat people on our team among these people was the chief. Everybody else lost all the games most of the time. Anyway, I'm not going to say much more, but I loved him like a dear friend, almost like a father to the sport of table tennis. And thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Now, let's welcome back to the stage Michael Reff to lead us in his song, Ode to the Chief. The lyrics are in your program book, so you can all sing along. Michael? We're vamping a little bit while Michael gets his guitar.
Hello again. So this is the same lyrics as what I read in the poem before, but it's in a more musical sense. So. Chief was a man full of character and drive, charismatic sportsman, diplomat, coach, through deep faith, love of people and life. His actions on and off the table beyond reproach. So this is an ode to the chief who's demonstrated the sports and character go hand in hand. And as a human, he is the highest rated, and ratings are something ping-pongers understand. His two main sports of track and field and table tennis highlighted his career and established his legacy. On table with paddle to opponents, he was a menace, but was gracious with his time to help all levels of proficiency. So this is an ode to the chief who's demonstrated the sports and character go hand in hand. And as a human, he is the highest rated, and ratings are something ping-pongers understand. One anecdote states that the chief would arrive 2 hours before his games would start. First hour to greet all, so no one was deprived of his good-natured spirit, then less hour for the warm-up part. So this is an ode to the chief who's demonstrated the sports and character go hand in hand. And as a human, he is the highest rated, and ratings are something ping-pongers understand. So this is an ode to the chief who's demonstrated the sports and character go hand in hand. And as a human, he is the highest rated, and ratings are something ping-pongers understand. And ratings are something ping-pongers understand. And ratings are something ping-pongers understand. Thank you.
And ratings are something ping-pongers understand. Yes. Now, our concluding speaker. Welcome, please, the organizer of this fabulous event, Thomas Hu, the head of AYTTO. Thomas, please come up to the mic.
Thomas! James, come on. Come on, James.
Who's Thomas?
James!
Woo! This took a little muscle sometimes, and Thomas always had people he could call on, and I was just one of them.
I don't really know James. Come on, James. Stay here. He's the mastermind of this project. He's from the very beginning.
I just want to say the chief inspired me, and to get behind Thomas and everyone here was such a delight. Sometimes we had some people that were opposed to what Thomas wanted to do, and I'll say it right now, it didn't stop us, and he's here, and no, I'm not going to stay up here and stand next to you while you speak,
No,
but I'm here for everything.
Thank you, James. He's there from the beginning. Thank you for staying the course. Encouragement, advices. Thank you. Do the rock. Thank you. And thank you for the sponsors, the volunteers, and the committee. Those, no fights. and without you guys, none of this is possible, really. Julia, Robert, Max, Pink Thoughts, Spin, Frank just left, I think. But really appreciate all of you guys here. And all the people who come here just to pay respect to the one and only chief. From people here, right down the block, Manhattan, Queens,
Bronx, Brooklyn, Long Island, Westchester, right? Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Colorado, coming all the way Florida. Incredible. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think all of us are hungry to really do some contribution to help table tennis. I think looking up to the chief, he knows all the sacrifice that we put together are not nearly as equal as he did. But we'll try. Hopefully one day we'll make him proud of us. And all you guys are hungry to help, hungry to make this a better place, bring equity and diversity and better table tennis players, better kids growing up. I could smell it. You hungry for pizza? Well, we still trying to track down the pizza place supposed to be here like 10 minutes ago. So, but we'll be there, we'll get it. And after lunch, I think Winnie's waving. I think the pizza place coming. So let's have a party. Go Chief! Chief! Chief!
Had a teenage daughter who attended Hopper Valley Junior High. Well, her daughter came home one afternoon and didn't leave a stop to play. And she said, Mom, I've got a note here from the Hopper Valley PTA. Well, the note said, Mrs. Johnson, you're wearing your dress is way too high. It's reported you've been drinking after running around the field for a while. And we don't wear you ought to be drinking out of
I went into it like.
Hello, everybody. We would like to get a group photo before everybody head off to your pizza, beverages. If everybody can gather in the middle of the field, see my hand here, follow the hand. We'll gather here, we'll get the river as the backdrop, and we'll take a group photo. Thank you all.